You were supposed to finish school, get a job, get married. That's usually what we would think. You see it on TV and movies. Um, some of you have had parents that met in college, and the history of your grandparents who either met in college or met before college, and they did their thing, and then they came together after college, and then they got married. And that's kind of the path that, at least for the 80s babies and the 90s babies, we were taught that, you know, get out of school, get a job, get married, or get out of college. Because school, you could have finished high school and got a job and got married, but one way or another, you typically in that order. And it was ideally simple. It was expected to be a linear path to a life of picket fences and shared last names, ideally wrapped around the facade of the American dream, because you would want to find you a partner, get married, have some kids, live in a nice suburban neighborhood with a white picket fence and an HOA individual that would get on your nerves, and you'd have a good job to pay for it all. Michael says, have 4 kids, buy a home, get his job, live in the American dream. Yes. And ironically, while that is the thought, Leave It to Beaver. You're right. Leave It to Beaver. The Brady Bunch. Um, Different Strokes. Yeah, all of those gave out the same idea. And the weird part about it is that that image came out long before the massive quantities of inflation and the lack of income that met the spread. But what happens when that path isn't the road to happiness anymore? What if, for a whole generation, it leads somewhere else entirely, like a completely different location? For millions, that dream isn't a white picket fence, it's freedom. And the numbers don't lie. Because in the 1950s, the median age for a woman to marry was just over 20 years old. Today, the number has jumped dramatically. According to the US Census Bureau, the median age for a first marriage in 2024 was 30.2 years of age for men and 28.6 for women. And this isn't just a small delay, it's a seismic shift. An entire generation is looking at the institution of marriage, the bedrock of society for centuries, and they are asking a collective and deeply important question: is it still worth it? Now, this fundamental question of marriage isn't coming from a place of cynicism or a rejection of love. It's an actual opposite approach. It stems from a huge generation wide rethinking of what it means to build a happy and successful life. Millennials and plenty of generations in the past, shaped by economic recession and tech revolution and a huge social change, aren't just putting off marriage, they're actively choosing to build their own lives first and then go seek the marriage. They're putting financial security first in an insecure world, and they're demanding the personal freedom to figure out who they are before trying their life, uh, uh, all of their life goals to be tied to or bound to someone else exclusively. Now, granted, this is going to lead to a whole different ball game of bad choices, that they're going to live their best life first and then run out there and go and try to get married, where you're going to have more individuals carrying baggage into their marriage, extra children, financial debt, stuff to that effect. But this is the collective that we live in today. Constitution states you have the right to pursue happiness, but you're not guaranteed it. Well, yeah, you're actually, the Constitution gives you the right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And in this country, you're not guaranteed any of it. You're not guaranteed freedom. You're not guaranteed nothing. You're not guaranteed security. You're not guaranteed nothing out here. But you can chase it for as long as you want. As long as your ability to chase it doesn't deprive somebody else of their ability to chase it. So on tonight's show, we're gonna get past the headlines about those millennials and killing whatever they're killing, yet another industry, and exploring the powerful, complex, and deeply personal reasons behind this historic shift. He's like, no, you're not. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we are. We're definitely going to get through this. We're going to get past all of the things that the millennials are killing off, because the millennials are destroying a lot of the traditions that we used to have back in the day. And I don't blame them, because when it doesn't work anymore, you have to start doing something else. We can't just follow certain paths simply because our great 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 ancestors used to do that back in the day, because you never see change and you never see improvement if you don't apply change, if you don't try something different. So we're going to break down the four big reasons why this generation is rewriting the rules of love and commitment. And first, we'll look at the crushing economic realities that can make the traditional timeline of marriage feel like a financially fantasy. And then second, we're going to explore the cultural pivot towards individualism and the search for personal fulfillment. Third, we're going to confront the long shadow of divorce that has hung over this generation since childhood, like we talked about yesterday, which will be shaping how they see commitment and risk going forward. And then finally, we'll be looking at how the millennials aren't just rejecting old models, but are creating new ones, redefining what happens uh, when partnership is brought into the life, even identifying what it means in the 21st century to have a partner. So this is the story of why generations are choosing to be free. So if that is you, you'll be able to marinate with when we discuss why they decide to marry, when they decide to marry, and recognize that it's not out of obligation, but out of absolute compromise choice. So he says, happy Friday evening, everyone. It's another weekend. Remember to empower your life. Well, I can agree with that. The the weekend seems to be the part of the week where everybody starts to unwind and start running out and splurging and throwing everything. He said, "What's your pronouns?" Uh, that's a good question, because traditional pronouns, I'm a he, you're a he. 65% of this male driven podcast are he's and hims and his. And then, the other 35% of the podcast are hers and she's. And then there's a whole different group that is unidentified. That is, since January of this year, redivided into the dominant his and hers. So whatever your pronouns were on your birth certificate, that's what they are now. Now, if you paid some money to change your pronouns on your birth certificate, then whatever your pronouns are now, that's what they are. So when we start talking about, now, you got to think about the fact that when we start talking about marriage and divorce, it is not exclusively towards heterosexual marriage. However, statistically speaking, uh, homosexual marriage, male male relationships are more successful than relationships that involve females, because the heterosexual marriage of male females have just as much, uh, if not less, chaos in it than the female female relationships. So, in a relationship where there are no men involved, the same complaints happen in a relationship where there are males involved. But in a relationship where there are no females involved, there's far less complaints. So, based on the statistics, if you really ask yourself, because 70% of women walk away from a marriage, 70 to 90% of women walk away from a marriage. And that 70 to 90% doesn't depreciate when there are no men involved. In fact, there's a larger quantity of separations when there's no men involved. But there's a far smaller quantity of separations when there are exclusively men involved. You have to ask yourself, where's the problem? That's one of the things that you got to think about. Michael says, can't touch that. Yeah, you're right. So let's start with the least romantic, but maybe most powerful force shaping millennial decisions about marriage: money, or more accurately, the serious lack of it. To get the millennial mindset, you have to understand they entered adulthood on the broken promise of the generations before them. They were told if they worked hard and got a college degree, they'd be set for life. Completely false. Instead, they graduated into the Great Recession, holding a degree in one hand and a mountain of debt in the other. And that starts with the first anchor weighing down the idea of marriage: student debt crisis. In 2025, Americans' total student loan debt has swelled to a massive $1.77 trillion. The average federal student loan debt for one person is far more than $39,000 for a bachelor's degree. For those with the graduate's degrees, which are often needing far more stable careers today, that number could easily pass $100,000, which is one of the reasons why Donald Trump gave you guys a $200,000 lifetime cap. Whatever you're going to do in college, you're going to do with 200 grand. This isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It's a monthly payment that feels like a mortgage, because it takes you, like we discussed before, like 25 or 30 years to pay off your student debt if you're overpaying the principal, the minimum amount. But you're doing it without the house. It's a constant financial drain that shapes every life choice. So think about it. How can you even think about merging your financial life with someone else's when you're already chained to a debt that feels impossible to escape? The romantic idea of what's mine is yours gets terrifying when what's mine is a six-figure liability. And this debt pushes back all major life milestones. He said, love debt. It's if it's yours. Nah, I'm not loving debt. Special shout out to Bayside. It's been a while since Bayside has been here. I got something for Bayside real quick. Let me do this real quick. I'm gonna have to edit the thing because it's right there in the middle. I did that for Bayside when we were doing the 9x16. Now I have to do one that spreads out into a 16x9. Very much appreciative that you come back, Bayside. Hope the family is doing well. Definitely missed you, man. Definitely missed you. He said, "Thanks God it's Friday. Glad to be back." Man, you've missed out on a lot of things. You should put some time into going back and taking a look at some of the other shows that you missed, because we've been talking about a bunch of different investment opportunities. We've crossed over 50 different stock options. Everything is good except my engine blown. Man, that sucks. That sucks. This is why you got to have a backup car. Yeah. So every Tuesday we was giving a different financial idea so that you guys could make money for you over the last like 4 months. So you've missed out on quite a few things over the past few weeks, and we've given some insights on some political changes. So those things are some things that you really should tap into, and then some personal advice that was coming out Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays. So it's always good for you to go back and swing, and that can get you caught up. Because if you're listening to that in the background while you're driving to and from work, you'll be able to get fully caught up to what we got going on. By the time you get back into the show, it's almost like cramming for an exam. You know everything that's about to happen. So, as for today, we're going to be talking about the reason why millennials aren't really getting involved in marriage. We just talked about yesterday about why marriage doesn't last with individuals over the age of 40. And today we're going to talk about why it doesn't last and why they delay getting into it for the individuals under the age of 40. And then tomorrow we're going to be talking about some of the major reasons why the people make some of the worst choices early on that leads to a downward spiral in their marriages. He said Lindo. Special shout out to Lindo. Oh, Linda. Woo! Linda. Special shout out to Linda. So recognizing that this large six-figure debt that hits you fresh out of college delays home ownership. It makes starting a family feel reckless, and put the idea of a wedding, which is an event that now costs over $30,000 on average for the cheapest kind of wedding that you can perform, that's not simply going to the justice of the peace and having a couple Subway sandwiches, into the realm of absurdity. Because if you're already owing $40,000, $50,000 worth of student debt, you're not going to have $30,000. He says he's going to call Alex. Hey, if you don't call Linda, you call Alex. Call Kate, call Larry. For many individuals, that money would be much better spent paying down some of the high interest loans that are on the day one party of them getting into their lifestyle. And that's one of the things that a lot of people think about when they're postponing their marriage, when they're postponing starting to date, when they're postponing investing into the relationships, because they just got too much stuff on their financial plate. Especially when men are usually the ones that are responsible for paying for everything. Those guys who come out of college with a lot of student debt, they have a lot of personal bills. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul to try to make ends meet for themselves. They're not quite wrapping their minds around a long-term committed relationship or a 20-year plan that leads them into a future with someone else that's going to be a financial obligation. Because truth, even in the egalitarian society, women cost men 41% of the man's income, regardless of how much money the woman spends on herself. And the children are also going to be an additional cost, even if the parents split the bill. So the man has to pay for the wife and the kids, even if the wife is paying for the wife and the kids, or girlfriends in unwed relationships. It's like starting a race of life with one arm broken. It's like starting the race of life with no legs and no assistive devices to help you run. It's crazy. If you started a 100-meter dash 200 meters behind, talking about some you're going to come out in first place, that you're not likely to make it. You don't even want to participate because you know you're not going to win. which this is one of the reasons why young men are bowing out of the dating game. Now, they don't avoid the hookup. Most men will not turn down getting laid. But there's a difference between getting laid and random or regular entertainment versus a long-term lifestyle commitment. Huge difference. The debt becomes a burden out of the gate, and it creates a mindset of financial survival. And marriage and long-term relationships seem like a luxury that is not part of that survival. The priority isn't building a shared life. It's making sure that you can stay afloat on your own first. And since marriage becomes a luxury item that many just can't afford, they typically avoid that. Some that end up in romantic relationships typically fall into those relationships because they were a financial benefit to somebody else, and or the other person was a financial benefit to them. They come together because they're saving money on resources. A child ends up into the fray, and it's cheaper for them to stay together and take care of the kid than it is for them to live in two separate houses and try to take care of that same kid. So, out of the interest of financial stability, they end up in a relationship that leads to a wedding of some kind, whether it's justice of the peace or a small $15,000 wedding where they only bring a very select group of individuals to the event because they got to go back to work anyway, and there's no honeymoon, right? On top of the debt is the second huge economic hurdle, the housing crisis and the crushing cost of living. Now, the main symbol of the traditional marital dream is a single family home. This is now a laughable, out loud laughter of completely non reachable expectations for a massive part of this generation. As of early 2025, home prices nationally are up a skyrocketing 60% since just 2019. And according to one analyst, nearly 75% of US households can't afford a median priced new home in 2025, which is one of the reasons why Donald Trump was giving out the Trump accounts to all of the newborns born in 2025 through 2028, which gives them the ability to, if they invest in it correctly, if the family members are capable of investing in it correctly, to give the kids at least a little bit of money to put down towards buying a house when they become 18 to 20 years old, or put it down towards their college education. Me, myself, I would put it down towards buying a house and then go to college and use my college education to pay for my mortgage so that when I got out of college, I would not owe for my house. And then all I would owe is student debt, where I would have a guaranteed place to stay. And as long as they're giving you tax credits for paying off your student loan, I would be able to leverage that against the tax bill that my house is going up against, and potentially not have to worry about the taxation for my house. This I said, Xander, would you agree that social media and dating apps have kind of hurt one-on-one experiences in real time as for dating? Well, yes. Social media, and that's actually going to be one of the things we're going to be talking about later in this piece, but social media has increased the accessibility of the dating pool. While connectivity does happen more frequently, we have a lot more people that are on the dating apps that are looking for frequent hookups, just trying to have fun. Those people that are looking for long-term commitment are not able to find that long-term commitment in walking distance or inside of their own neighborhood. They're finding that commitment in a state next door on the other side of the country, on the other side of the world, where you're basically finding a partner that you can bond with that's ultimately just a pen pal, because you can't afford to go there every day or every week, which makes long distance relationships a more common thing, but still unsustainable. You get ghosted more often, but because you have more options, you ghost people more often. So while everyone feels the pain of being ghosted by somebody, if you're no longer interested in the relationship, very few people put in the effort to communicate to the other person that they're no longer interested in that conversation. So there's a lot of things going on there. And then when you start talking about the one-on-one experience, you have in the dating phase, people still want to keep their reputations up and their digital image up. So they'll still entertain conversations in their social media platforms, which is in some situations identified as emotional cheating in a real life relationship, because you're formulating bonds that are sometimes stronger than the bond that you have in your reality relationship, and that causes issues. Then we have a very small quantity of filtered communication between one another, especially when we're in private communication. Um, all of these things pose a problem. Then we also have this ideology in our heads that we can do better because there's 5 or 10 or 15 other people that are interested in talking to us, or at least that's the benefit that women have. Guys might keep their options open if they have 5 or 6 women, if they're lucky to have 5 or 6 women that they are talking to at the same time, preventing them from being able to commit. So there's two different dynamics. Women are willing to abandon the relationship they're currently in because they have 5 or 10 different suitors waiting their turn. And men are failing to commit because they have 3 to 5 different good relationships over the internet that they don't want to abandon, not sure which one is the best one to choose from. Because if you pick one and drop the other four, and the one that you pick is a bad choice, then you regret that, and you're not always able to circle back to the other four that you have rejected. So yeah, social media is a huge uh, distraction towards life. And then we also have the offset that a lot of people have fear of being alone. So before they live a life of loneliness, they will establish a lifestyle online so that they can interact with other people. But while you might spend hours at a time every day online talking to other people, you also find yourself alone because you're in the house by yourself on your computer or your cell phone or your tablet, and you're texting and emailing and messaging somebody on the computer. And when you get off of the computer, get off of that electronic device, you're immediately hit with that feeling of being alone. And there is nothing you can do about that. And then again, you still have that same dynamic. Once you've logged off, everybody else logged on. 30 minutes later, you don't really have anybody to talk to. You got to log back on and find somebody to talk to. You find people scrolling through the shorts reel trying to find people to communicate with. um, Recognizing that as a problem, and then recognizing the cost of housing as a problem, we've come to find that in order for you to afford one house, a buyer would need to make at least $126,700 a year, because the salary that they would need would be way beyond what most young adults earn, because the average young adults earn between 30 and 50,000 a year. Once they become more experienced in the fields, you start seeing them making between 45 and 60,000 a year. And if they can get promotions on their job and make it into middle management, they're making between 65 and 85,000 a year. And that's pretty much all there is to it for the average American, working class American. Where if you're making $1,700 a week as a pay scale, you are a working class American. If you're making 1,700 bi-weekly, or if you're making 1,700 a month, you are below the standard of working class here in America in 2025. So for those individuals that are making $4,000 a month or less on their paycheck, you're part of the poor class. Even if you have a good standard of living, you're considered financially across the from end to end in the United States part of the poor class. crazy, isn't it? Michael says that $1,000 in 20 years would have devalued if it was invested at 7% in 20 years. That value would be about $3,800. Yeah, not much growth. Well, if they put it in and expectedly somewhere around 7 to 10% return, depending on what stocks that the government would invest into, you would have a baseline of about $3,000 in 18 years, 18 to 20 years, $3,000 to $4,000 as a baseline. But if the parents are investing in the kid's future, they could, depending on how much money they invest in the kid's future, have something closer to $14,000 to start with, which still isn't a lot of money. But if it's used as a down payment towards a house, imagine this. If you've got 4 kids born between 2025 and 2028, and during this time period, each one of those kids have $1,000 account. No, let's rewrap that up. Let's say you have 2 kids over the next 4 years. Okay, when they both turn 18 years old in 20 years, if they you, assuming that you just have the government money there, which would not be it would not be logical to have because it's post tax money. But if you put a little bit of money into the kids over the years, each kid have something close to $8,000 per kid. They have a total of $16,000. Those 2 kids could go half on a 2-bedroom house, 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. Those 2 kids could own that house. Those 2 kids could split the income and live on their own without their parents. Or if they were going to navigate themselves into a quote unquote family house, when I gave you the hypothetical of if they had 4 kids, 3 kids born within this generational time, and each one of those kids had like $5,000 in their account, that's $15,000. And if the parents threw down on top of that another $5,000, that would be almost $20,000. And they could be able to put that $20,000 towards a $300,000 or $400,000 house where they could buy, in fact, a 4-bedroom house or 5-bedroom house, depending on what city and state they're living in, where all of the kids, now you're dividing the cost of the house by the 5 incomes that are in the house, the 3 kids and 2 parents that are in the house. And now you're able to pay for this house. You can either pay the minimum expectations on a house and you have more money to invest in other things, or you can pay off the mortgage on the house a whole lot faster because you have 5 times more income coming in to pay for the house, and then you own the house. The dynamic is that the kids would be able to take that house and either utilize it as leverage towards rental property in the future, or they could split and sell the house and turn it into a profit down the line. But it gives them something to do when they hit the ground running. Because instead of mom and dad renting their entire lives, mom and dad can lead towards helping the kids buy a house, move into the kids' house, and pay rent for the kids' house. And then when mom and dad dies, the kids have a house. That's one of the reasons why the Trump account was designed. So it wasn't just for the sake of giving them millions of dollars to hit the ground running with. But if you, as an adult, are capable of giving your child $50 a month of allowance, right? Or for some reason, parents are giving their kids $100 a month of allowance. If you're able to give your kids $100 a month worth of allowance and 50 of it goes to the kid in cash and the other 50 of it goes into the kid's stock account, you're likely going to be putting away about $600 a year added to that $1,000. even though you're giving the kids play money, you're able to take half of the money you would have gave them and put that towards that Trump account, which means that by the time that child was 18 years of age, adding $600 to the fold every year for 20 years, you should have closer to $14,000, 14 to $15,000. And if you could afford to do that for each one of your kids, you would have closer to $14 or $15,000 per kid. And with 3 kids, you would have like $42,000. And $42,000 at 10 to 20%, you would be able to buy an $800,000 house. Now, if everybody's making, almost 60,000 a year, and you've got 4 incomes coming in for 60,000, at 60 or 70,000 a year, you're making more than enough money to pay for that house. Even at $4,000 or $5,000 a month mortgage, each person's paying $1,000 for the house. You've got plenty of space to have a 5 or 7 bedroom house on a 5-acre piece of property. So just simply being able to take a little bit of chunk change and putting it away for the kids for the 20 years before they become an adult, yeah, you could. Now, if you just think about how each individual kid could potentially have $15,000 to start with, they could buy their own $150,000 house and only have to pay $800 a month on their mortgage, which is way cheaper than the $1,500 of rent for a 1-bedroom apartment. That was the mentality of when the Trump put that together. So I wanted you guys to think about that before we go forward. And Michael says, would you buy a smaller house instead of 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, no dining room? I would be cheaper. Yeah, I would preferably, if I'm doing this as a value save, because your homestead doesn't have to be a mansion. Your homestead should be able to acquire a room and board for you and the immediate people that are guaranteed to be with you for the majority of your life. So if it's you and a parent, you might want to have a 1 or 2 bedroom house. If it's you and your partner, you would do a 1-bedroom house. If you're going to plan on having kids, you're still going to stop at a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, which is still around $150,000. Smaller is better when you're starting out because you have a guaranteed place to live. Your utilities are cheaper, your expenses are less, and then you have a guaranteed capability to put more money away so that when you go and buy the second house, you have more money. Because with the second house, if the first house is owned, when you go to get the second house, you can mortgage the first house to leverage your capital for the second house, and you can use one of the 2 houses as a rental property, which guarantees you success. Bezos says, Xander always makes it make sense. Yes, I do. I rationalize it. There's that red flag. If it's not, the if is only a hypothetical because it's not necessarily a red flag. Recognizing the fact that when you invest in your children, there will be more on the back end when your children become adults. Most parents who save for the children's college typically start trying to do that around the age of 10, not around the age of birth. If parents were putting money away in an account that the parents could not tank before the children get grown, that account would be there when the children become adults. College funds that are at the discretionary withdrawal of the parents are funds that'll be there until catastrophic failure occurs, and then you have to take the college fund and put it towards the mortgage, put it towards a new car, put it towards a medical expense, and then the college tuition is gone. But the Trump account, the kid accesses it when the kid is an adult. The adults can add money to it, but there's nothing put in place that indicates that the parents can withdraw that $1,000 out of the account. And Michael says $7,440. True. That's another way to look at it, but it's still double the original $3,400 that you talked about before. Xander, we got married for $5,000 and people, it was intimate and wonderful. Everyone had a great time, allowing us to go to the Bahamas with no debt. Keep it simple, people. He's right. That it can be done. $5,000 and invited 50 people. It's manageable. Everyone had a good time. Then we went to the Bahamas. Well, okay, but you got to recognize $5,000 on a low end. You had a group of individuals that did not need to be widely impressed. You could have selected a venue that did not really cost that much, or a free venue that allowed for the reception. You didn't have to pay that much money for the church. You wasn't sitting over there thinking about the luxurious, exclusive, whatever cathedral that's like $50,000 just to reserve the place, and then the reception hall that's another uh, $10 or $15,000. These weddings can get expensive when you start thinking about the weddings, and you have to also understand that if you're talking about $5,000 for the marriage plus the trip to Bahamas, the honeymoon is part of the calculations of the wedding in most cases. And if the trip to Bahamas was another $3,000, you spent $8,000 on the marriage. So you got to think about that as well. Dad, can I borrow your wallet? No. My kids will look at my wallet and know that there's nothing in it. He said $1,000 compounded over 20 equals a house. Yeah, that is true. We're talking first time home buyers. Yes, 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 yes. You're going to be talking about first time home buyers with first mortgages, because the children are 18 and they should not have bought a house before the age of 18. So you would be talking about first time home buyers. And they do have first time home buyer credits. And but even with the first time home buyer credit, if you had $4,000 or $5,000 to your name and they give you the zero down first time home buyer credit to go with it, they would be putting down the 10 or 20% that you need, the $15,000, $15,000 to $25,000 down towards a house, and you would be adding another $6,000 to that, which then still reduces the value of the house. So if you bought $150,000 house and they're going to do the zero down first time home buyer credit and give you $15,000, and then you're going to give them an extra $6,000 on top of that, that works. And you can always negotiate that into the deal where you find yourself in a position where you owe less for your house, which means you can pay more for the principal towards your house, which means you can reduce the cost of the house sooner. Debt free, congrats. Hey, you can be debt free and have absolutely nothing, or you can be debt free and have a bunch of stuff. It just depends on how you plan things, and it depends on how your parents teach you how to plan things. But speaking about these mortgages, at the same time, you have rents that have also shot up, with the median gross rent climbing to nearly $1,500 in 2024. So if your mortgage for your house is under $900 a month, you're saving a bunch of money to buy your first house at 18, 19 years old. And if your parents taught you financial responsibility from birth, you should be able to balance the budget to where your mortgage is always paid before any stupid decisions occur, and that you're always putting extra money aside to cover the mortgage in case you lose your job or have a stupid breakup or anything to that effect. You're taught not to tell people how much money you have, only how much you're willing to spend, and how much you're willing to spend should be less than 10% of how much you have, so that you always have an undisclosed quantity of capital to cover an emergency like getting robbed by somebody you trusted. When you tell your best friend where you stashed the drugs, and then they go to your house while you're in the bathroom and run off with all your drugs, if you never showed them that you had something worth taking, they wouldn't take from you. The most crimes that occur are between two people who know each other. Outside of white collar crimes and mass heists, where in the mass heist, they know the target. Usually, when crimes occur, the victim of the target of the crime is known by the person committing the crime. They know that you have something worth stealing. That's why they're coming to steal it. They didn't just stumble across your house and fell into the house and was like, oh, Fabergé egg. No, somebody told somebody that there's a Fabergé egg in that house, and what kind of security system protects that egg. And then they make a plan to break into the house where you're completely caught off guard. and they knock off the house and run off with the stealable merchandise. But if nobody told you, if you had no proof, no evidence, no information, nobody was shown that you store anything in this location, nobody would have a reason to rob you. First time people start snitching, housekeepers. Second time people start snitching, in insurance claims, because when you have insurance on assets in the house, there's a record somewhere that there's assets in the house. Trying to told you, safety deposit box. You keep it in the safety deposit box. When they knock off a bank and just break into everybody's safety deposit box, it is what it is. You don't have to have nothing recorded in it, but if they bust your deposit box open and there's something of value in it, it's gone. So you got to think about the difference between not having enough money to buy a house when you need almost $125,000 a year income to buy a house if you don't have that startup, or the increasing quantities of rent that you have to pay when you're not even making that kind of money. Because if you're needing to pay $1,500 a month for rent, and most commercial properties are asking for 3 times the rent or more, you're looking at requiring $4,500 a month income to be able to afford that apartment. And if you're paying $4,500 a month income, if you're making a $4,500 a month income, you're making that $1,000 a week. Now, for those, or actually, you're looking at $1,200 a week, roughly, to exceed that $4,500 a week or per month requirement. Now, if you think about this, for those of you that make a paycheck of like $1,000 biweekly or $1,200 biweekly, where you're covering like $600 to $900 per week, you're making less than 3 times the rent on a $1,500 apartment, which also means that in order for you to qualify for that $1,500 apartment, you're going to need a roommate, which also means that your roommate, unless your roommate is your romantic partner and y'all are going to share one room, you're going to need to get a 2-bedroom. And if $1,500 a month is going to be for the 1-bedroom apartment, you're likely going to be spending $1,700 to $2,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment, which means that the two of y'all are going to have to make $4,000 per person per month in order for y'all to cover that $2,000. Because remember, 3 times the rent, you're going to need to make $6,000 between the two of y'all. That's the dynamic. Now, this creates a brutal financial trap. Millennials are spending a bigger chunk of their income on just having a place to live than any generation before them, leaving very little for savings or investing or paying off debt, which is why I give you guys plenty of ways to make, save, and invest money so that you can utilize the extra money you're getting from your investments to help pay for the debt. Millennials are running a marathon on a financial treadmill, working harder just to stay in the same place, which throws off work-life balance and angers a lot of the millennials, which leads a lot of the millennials to having more financial demands for their employer and finding more unconventional ways, like being a podcaster, to make and generate revenue. One of the reasons why you're starting to see podcasting change is because outside of making an ass out of yourself or doing something conflictual on social media, it's hard for you to get views. It's hard for you to get things off the ground. And the other dynamic issue is going to be that it costs money to run the platform. And if you can't afford to navigate that, they typically start up a channel and then they give up on it. And you see a lot of YouTube channels that might have 1,000 to 5,000 views and a few hundred videos, haven't posted anything in several months because they can't afford to keep doing this. In this climate, the financial stability that used to be a reason to get married has become a primary reason to avoid it. Adding another person's expenses or the expectation of paying for a family lifestyle feels less like a partnership and more like a recipe for financial disaster. The old sequence was get married, then buy a house. For millennials, it's if I can even ever afford a house, I can't imagine also affording a wedding or the financial weight of marriage, especially if you're expected to be the financial breadwinner. Our third economic factor is the huge shift in work itself. Boomers often had careers with one company, with a pension that paid you after you stopped working, a predictable expectation of raises, where if you're with the company for a certain number of years, you're going to get a certain income. You're looking at $1, $2, $5 salary bump every 1 to 5 years, where you're there for 20 years and you're still above the minimum wage expectations without having to beg your boss for money or having to go into double overtime. Millennials, on the other hand, grew up in the gig economy with contract work and flat wages. Job security is a thing of the past. Michael said, and that's why I buy land. Everyone needs space. Well, true. If you buy land and you can afford to develop housing, then you can turn that into rental property. If you buy land that has housing on it, you can utilize that not only as rental property, but as liquidatable assets or leverageable assets that you can utilize to acquire additional housing. If you have rental properties that are generating rental income, you can leverage that even more so because it pays for itself. So the lender is going to see that as a huge benefit, which allows you to borrow a little bit more capital towards putting up for additional assets, additional estates. Um, and if you're generating, because one of the things about the Trump accounts is that when you're buying a house, they're expecting you to buy a single family home, not a multifamily home. And if you're buying a single family home, you're going to be buying like a 1 to 3 bedroom house, a 4 bedroom house, whatever. And the money that you get out of the Trump account will go towards that house. You live in that house, and you might live in that house for the first 1 to 5 years as you try to manage and mitigate the mortgage. And then at some point, you would then try to diversify because you're saving money on rent by paying for your own house. And you would try to diversify and take the extra capital that you don't have to pay for the first house and put it towards buying the second house and generate income. Some people might, like I said, buy the house and then go to college and then take the overages that comes from college to pay the house off faster and then utilize that ability to mortgage the house after you've paid off the house so that you can leverage that money to go and buy a second house and use the second house to build up. Or you can continue to maintain paying for your first house, use the extra money that you don't need from your student loans to buy a second house on principal. And then when you buy that second house on principal, you use it as a rental property. And now the tenants are paying for your houses. Once you start having more than one house where the second house is paying for the cost of the first house, you're easily able to manage life where you could be just a small time landlord where you have your house and a house next door, or your house and a house down the street in the same neighborhood, where you can drive down to the tenant's house and pick up the money for the rent once a month, and you can drive past that house as you go to take care of business every day and make sure that the yard is good, and it gives you something to do when you hit the ground running, which is a whole lot easier than what we had as Gen Xers and baby boomers. In modern times, many have to patch together an income from multiple sources with no guarantee of what they'll earn next month, let alone next year. Working from gig to gig, working from hustle to hustle, where their consistency in always making sure that they have more money coming in for next month is the only guarantee that they have. This uncertainty makes long term planning incredibly hard. Committing to supporting someone for richer or for poorer feels a lot more daunting when poorer seems like a constant looming threat. Why would you legally bind yourself to someone else financial debts or their financial fates when your own is so incredibly shaky? This isn't a lack of commitment to the person. It's a practical response to a volatile economy. Financial independence isn't just a performance, it's a survival strategy. Before you can build a safety net with someone else, you have to try and weave one for yourself, no matter how fragile it is. Finally, we have to look at and talk about the wedding industrial complex. The modern wedding has transformed from a simple ceremony into a massive social media driven production with a huge price tag. The pressure to have the perfect wedding, right? With the designer dress, the huge venue, and 100+ guests is intense. See, Bayside said we only had 50. He was doing it big time because me, I would have had like 10, maybe. And actually, 3 or 4 of the guests would have been my dogs. So if I would have had 7, everybody else would be like, oh, why you didn't invite me to the wedding? It was a rumor mill wedding invitation. So if you didn't hear it through the grapevine, you wasn't part of the vine. So a handful of my closest constituents, those would be the ones that would be at that particular wedding. So 3 or 4 people from my side of the family, 3 or 4 people from her side of the family. That's it. So you're basically looking at a couple sisters and brothers that you communicate with the most, a father, mother, auntie, that's your favorite. Somebody's kids might come too. That's part of the +1 inclusion, and that's it. So like I said, 10. Because truth is, when you get married, you got to have witnesses. So if you have witnesses for her and witnesses for him, if I bring 3 or 4 witnesses and you bring 3 or 4 witnesses, that's like 8 plus the bride and the groom. That's 10. And I ain't dealing with nothing else. Wedding reception, my behind. Y'all better get in line over there by the buffet at Golden Corral or something. I don't know what y'all what y'all thought we was gonna do. Shoot, go buy 50 burgers from McDonald's. That's but some of these people, they're talking about 150, 200 person wedding, which means you've got to rent out a space that holds that many people. And now you're looking at $5,000 or $10,000 worth of space that you're trying to rent out for the quantity of people you're going to invite. Then you're trying to buy enough food to feed these people, where typically, $30 to $50 a plate, unless you can get a really good deal at Olive Garden. You start adding 150 people to the plate, you start talking about $35,000 worth of food. So you got that $10,000 venue, $30,000 food, the $39,000 average. That's where they're getting that stuff from, plus the DJ, decorations, all of this other stuff. It's crazy. For a generation already drowning in debt and struggling with basic living costs, this expectation isn't just unrealistic, it's insulting. And for the factor of men, because while we're in an egalitarian lifestyle, there are very few women that will co-sign on the idea that she will buy the engagement ring and she will propose to him. He has to buy the engagement ring, which is supposed to be ideally 1/3 of his income. If he can afford to get her an engagement ring for $250, it's a very small ring, very small diamond, then he might be able to throw down and like Bayside, walk off with a $5,000 marriage and keep it simple. But if he gets a female that has those unrealistic expectations where he has been entertaining the the facade of charging it to the game like Ti, you can have whatever you like, she's gonna want that $10,000 wedding ring, which is gonna take like 3 months of your income, and then she's gonna want that $50 to $100,000 wedding, which is going to take 3 years of your income. And if you're saving for it out of your income, you guys are engaged for 5 to 10 years because that's how long it takes for this motherfucker to get the money to pay for the damn wedding. So remember when I told y'all yesterday, ask yourself, why is it that you're engaged and not married? And then ask yourself, why is it that he has not proposed? Maybe because the type of proposal you wish you could have was unrealistically outside of his budget. And maybe because the type of wedding that you want to have is unrealistically outside of his budget. And a man wants to give a woman what she wants. So instead of giving her less than what she wants, he will give her nothing and save until he can afford to get her what she wants. Because why waste money on a woman's dissatisfaction when you can just get her exactly what she wants and just have her wait for it? Yeah, she'll be pissy about the fact that she waited, but she will be ecstatic about the fact that she got what she wanted, instead of giving her what you can afford and her appreciating what you gave her, utilizing the mentality, it's the thought that counts. Since that dynamic doesn't work for men, we don't propose until we can afford to get the $10,000 ring, which means that we would have to build our credit up, take out a loan. We're making $150 payments for 2 years on this ring so that we can get her the $10,000 ring. Then we got to think about how we're going to take out yet another loan for the wedding, where we're going to be paying $250 a year or $250 a month for the wedding. And then you think about how we're still paying $250 a month for the student loans. So now we've got like $700 worth of financing that we have to pay for to get married, get the ring after getting out of college. This is the reason why millennials are like, oh no. Because again, if you're paying $500 a month, you still got to make $4,500 a month more than that to cover your rent. So now you're looking at a $5,000 a month income. That's over $50,000 a year. That's like $60,000 a year income. Many millennials look at the insane cost of a wedding and see a huge waste of resources. That $30,000, that $5,000, that could be down payment on a house. Seed money for a small business that would generate a lifetime of income. A big payment on the student loan so that they don't have to pay for that anymore. Or in some people's situation, especially the ladies who like to get away, a year of travel where you can finally get to travel the world at least once in your life so that you can say that you've done it. It represents a real investment in their lives and their own futures. It also represents real investment in their own freedom. Choosing not to spend it on a wedding is a rational economic choice. It's a rejection of the idea that a relationship legitimacy has to be bought with a lavish party. And I strongly agree with that, because every marriage that is allegedly supposed to be done through religion, not capital gain, is going to be done under the eyes of the religious background, the Lord that they pray to, right? Which ultimately means that since the church works for the people, if you gave the pastor $500, and that's a lot of money, the church should be able to hold a wedding, because if y'all go to church every Sunday and you're going to have the wedding during the Sunday service, the building was going to be accessed anyway. The wedding should be free. Just throwing it out there. But if you throw a little bit down, throw your 10% down to the church. If you make $50,000 a year, there go that $5,000 and go to the church and everything taken care of. But you still got to spend that $150 or $75 at the justice of the peace to get the marriage certificate for your taxation. You got to think about that. That part, the financial transactional side of marriage has to happen for the U.S. government, regardless of what you do in the church. And that's why I said, I'm like, shoo, we need to just go ahead and file this merger paperwork, this joint venture paperwork, and we can spend the rest of our life living the honeymoon. Have a look, Bayside. You invite some folks over for the game on Sunday. It turns into a wedding. You'd have spent like $75 on burgers and hot dogs, grilling. $30 on beer. The pastor's wearing a Buccaneers jersey. You do the service during halftime. Get married during the Super Bowl at your house. Invite 5 people. I'm telling you, it could really be entertaining and very affordable. It's just that's not realistic to what people want these days. He said, she finds out the stone is a fake. Oh, of course. Of course. The whole scenery is supposed to be artificial. I ain't trying to pay for nothing real. But for many, the most romantic gesture isn't a big wedding, but an honest conversation about financial goals and a shared commitment to building a secure future with or without a marriage certificate, which is one of the reasons why a lot of individuals are starting to live together more than getting married, because they benefit individually in the taxation of this economy. And then they benefit again as a combined income in the cost of living. If the economy explains why millennials feel that they can't afford to get married, the cultural shift towards personal fulfillment explains why many of them don't want to do this, at least not yet. This is a generation raised on a mantra of self-discovery and personal growth. So they were told to follow their passions, find themselves, and live their best life. And unlike older generations who often saw marriage and family as the main way to have that meaningful life, millennials see them as just one option among many. The ultimate goal isn't a successful marriage, but a successful self. It's an investment. Not in my life. Spam anyone. It is a good way to get in there. It really is. If you invest in yourself and invest in your life, you will find yourself in a position where you will have more capital gains later in life, which also means, for example, remember that Trump account we were talking about. You start off with 1,000, you invest 600 a year, every year till the child is 18. Then let's say the child and you are still investing in the account, because the account stays accessible until you withdraw it. So you don't have to withdraw it at 18. You can continue to invest in the account until the child gets out of college at 24. And then you take all that money out, and then you start having closer to $20,000, $30,000 in the account. And now they have the ability to buy a house. Now they're paying less money on the mortgage. They can put more money aside so that they can save up for the wedding. If they're in the dating field and they're looking for, here's funny, if the women were saving for their wedding and the men bought a house and the woman bought a house and the man and woman came together, they could move into one of the two houses, rent out the other house, and they've got a second income. If they're saving for the marriage, right, the profits that they're turning off of this two-house combination and putting money aside for the marriage, they could have a massive stock portfolio where the dividends from the stock portfolio could pay for the marriage, and they could still have a $150,000 marriage. It's a waste of money, but they could have it, but they would have the money to pay for that. Because if each of us has a reasonable mortgage, you got a job, I got a job, neither one of us have to pay more than $1,000 a month for the place. You rent out your house for $2,000 a month, and now we're making $1,000 profit. We could take the $1,000 profit and pay for the other house, so your house and my house is paid for, and the money that you and I make don't have to go towards our standard of living, which means that we have more money in our pocket. We just gained an extra $24,000 a year that we could put towards doing something else, which is one of the reasons why Trump did that. Instead of an expensive wedding, there's your down payment, simple justice of the peace, then a reception at a house. Simple justice of the peace and a reception in a drive-through. You ain't even got it. I want 5 number ones, large with Powerade. That's it. And we're gonna split it across 10 people. build your heaven on earth and let God build your home in heaven. Well, they haven't been teaching that in the church lately. In the church lately, they've been teaching a lot of people to sacrifice their now so that their afterlife is better. And I'm sitting over here thinking, no, you need to stop being wasteful now and start building up your next year so that next year is less stressful than this year, which gives you more abilities to focus on the year after and the next 5 and the next 10 and the next 20, so that in 20 years, you don't have to live the way you're living this year. This year should have been better standard of living than last year, and next year should be a better standard of living than this year, in spite of the inflation. And if that's not the case, you're doing something wrong year over year. And you need to find out where you're wasting money year over year and start shaving some of that expense off and reinvesting it somewhere where you're going to be making more money than you spend. And no matter how you do it, you want to practice making more money than you spend and then multiplying that profit so that you can continue to make more money than you spend after taxes. Unless you can generate enough tax deductible spending to not have to pay taxes and still have that extra money on the side. Now, this has led to what you might call the self-discovery mandate, which is what the millennials are dealing with right now. The years between finishing school and settling down aren't seen as a waiting period anymore. They're seen as a vital, non-negotiable time for figuring yourself out, where they're throwing it against the wall, they're dropping it like it's hot, they're 3 to 5 kids, that's a bunch of stuff going on. And then in their 30s, they're like, oh, I want to settle down now. Train wreck now. They want to settle down now. They're like a crashed Ford Pinto claiming to be a Porsche. I don't get it. This is the time for solo travels, for exploring hobbies. This is like 18 to 28, right? For living in different cities, for taking career risks. It's the period of intense personal growth, frequent flings, and marriage is often seen, rightly or wrongly, as the end of that chapter. Once they finish exploring life, that's when they go off and get married. Now you're looking outside the box. Isn't beautiful? Damn right. So it's viewed as an institution that requires compromise, sacrifice, and merging your identity with someone else's. For someone in their late 20s who feels like they're just starting to figure out who they are, the idea of hitting the brakes on that journey can feel like giving up on their own potential. They aren't willing to commit to a we until they've built a strong, independent me. And there's no me in we. There's a me in team, but there's no we in team. And there's no I unless you don't know how to spell. Now, this isn't selfish. It's a deep belief that a healthy partnership can only be formed between two whole, self-aware individuals. They want to bring a fully realized person to the relationship, not a work in progress. And that also brings back the dynamic that women are expecting the same. They're expecting the final product, not the work in progress. Michael says, as I climb the ladder of life, it gets easier to see reality. So awesome. Yeah. Now, this focus on the self is tied directly to career ambitions, which is the second pillar of personal fulfillment. And this is especially true for millennial women, who are the most educated generation of women in history. They've been encouraged to lean in, break glass ceilings, and build careers just as ambitious as their male counterparts. Now, this ambition has completely changed life timelines. The old pressure to marry in your early 20s often conflicted with the time needed to establish a career. The year that we're once spent finding a husband are now spent getting a master's degree, landing a fellowship, or climbing the corporate ladder. Oh, he said, come up. Here's a hand, the helping hand. You got to do it like this, right? Marriage, and especially children, are often seen as potential off ramps from the career path. While many believe it's possible to have it all, they're also realistic. They've seen older women struggle to balance career and family, and they are constantly, consciously choosing to prioritize their professional lives first. They're also constantly encouraged to consciously pursue that professional life. There's very little, only the men are saying, hey, get in there and do the family first and then navigate the work life. Because now that you've got however many kids you're going to have for your life, you can do the work life. All the women of all generations are saying the same thing. No, get your career and then figure kids out in your 30s. You're less likely to have children in your 30s than what you would be in your 20s. And you're less likely to have as many children in your 30s as you would be in your 20s. But if you chase your career for 10 years or 15 years between 18 and 35, and then you settle down, you can retire after accomplishing the career that you wanted to say that you've done it before, and now be the parent at the house. Because again, modern society does not allow for the masculine man to be the homemaker. Because if women were career driven women that were the alpha boss lady, $150,000 a year income women that were able to date the $30,000 part time man, she could have the children at 20, 25, and 30 and have the stay at home dad take care of the kids. And the woman could still be the Fortune 500 woman and they could still be living a $130,000 lifestyle. But that requires the women to go against the hypergamy theory where they must date a man that is more financially successful than her. Deep, isn't it? Delaying marriage is a strategic move to make sure that when they do partner up, they're in a position of professional and financial strength and won't have to sacrifice their hard won career. But by the time they get there, they're sacrificing the ability to stabilize a household with children. This leads to a bigger redefinition of what having it all even means. For many baby boomers, success was a checklist: a degree, a stable job, a spouse, a mortgage, and 2.5 kids, which would be 2 kids and a baby on the way. It was a standardized vision of the good life. Millennials have mostly thrown that checklist out. For this generation, having it all is deeply personal and self defined. For one person, it might be running a business from a laptop in Bali. For another, it might be a work life balance that allows for creative hobbies. For someone else, it might be a life of activism where they're always out there in the street protesting for some reason. The common thread is a rejection of a one size fit all model of success. And in this new framework, marriage isn't an automatic item on the checklist, it's an optional add on. Its values uh, are judged by whether it adds to or takes away from one's personal vision of a fulfilled life. Having babies later in life, less babies born. That's exactly true. Which is one of the reasons why Asia is having a population crisis of 4 billion people, because their older generation is over the age of 16 and the next generation is under the age of 40. Which means that when the last generation dies out, when their 60-year-olds die out at 70 or 80, their 40-year-olds or 20-year-olds, because there's like a 20 to 30-year age gap, are going to just be hitting that 50-year mark, that 50, 60-year mark. Which means the eldest person in the generation will no longer be way out there in their 80s. It might be in their 40s or 50s. For them, it's a very big concern because there's a larger quantity of older people than there are younger people. And then the younger people would have to take over society and they would need a lot more guidance. In America, with our 384 million individuals, and everybody's got that every man for himself situation, the less babies born means that we're not going to have as much of a expansion level in our population, but we will have a larger quantity of mid-level success, which means that we're going to have a lot more people able to afford the inflation. So as the United States becomes even more of an expensive country to live in, at least we will be able to navigate through that. Michael says boomers and the generations behind us are all headed to the boneyard. It's your generation. That is true. My generation is one step away from taking over the country, because typically you got to be 35 to run for president, and you typically don't see a president running until they're in their 50s or 60s. So in like 5 or 10 years, 10 or 15 years, you might see me running for president, depending on how many people are following the podcast. I might run for president. If marriage is seen as something that will limit the new generation's freedom, stifle their growth, or force them down a path that they didn't choose, they will simply opt out of marriage. They're not rejecting partnership, but they are rejecting the idea of marriage as a mandatory life stage. Finally, underlying all of this is a new and profound focus on mental health, which we were not paying attention to within the last 15 years. We actually just started getting into that. Millennials are a generation that speaks openly about anxiety, depression, and trauma in ways that used to be taboo. There's a wide understanding that emotional well being is essential for a healthy life. Oh, you are not lying. This generation is more than lost, bro. There are so many of these chillins out here making so many irresponsible decisions on social media. Remember the one girl, we were talking about it on the show a while back. You might not have been here when it happened, but the one girl who got hit by a fire truck because she was shaking her behind on top of a moving SUV, and then she fell off the SUV and got hit by a moving car, hit by a fire engine. Now, not too long ago, we have two females shaking their behinds on top of yet another SUV, where the driver of the SUV has no consideration of the fact that there are two people shaking their behinds on top of the car. Instead, when the light turned green, the vehicle pulls off, and the knuckleheads on top of the vehicle is trying to hold on for dear life because the vehicle is moving, and they do not have any type of safety restraints on them on top of this vehicle. To say, oh yeah, she was twerking on top of the SUV, go girl, go girl. Why do y'all promote negative behavior? A girl should not be fanning her behind, whether it's in a skirt, shorts, or pants, on top of a vehicle. Anybody with self-respect and dignity towards themselves is not supposed to be bent over for any reason in public. That's just my observation. Matter of fact, even when you go to pick up a box, you're supposed to squat down and lift with your legs, not bend over and lift with your back. So you should not be knees touching elbows at any point during your outside of your house life. Just want to throw that out there. So yeah, the whole generation is cooked. However, though, as they focus on their mental health, the awareness that comes from this directly impacts their approach to relationships. Their ability to be more emotionally distant allows them to entertain random hookups more than deep seated emotional bonds. Many feel like they aren't ready for marriage until they've done the initial work or enjoyed life for a reasonable period of time. They want to understand their attachment styles and learn healthy communication skills before entering a lifelong partnership. They are very aware that bringing unresolved emotional baggage into a marriage is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for disaster in a relationship before you even get to marriage when you're bringing all of this baggage. So, this therapeutic mindset means that getting ready for marriage isn't just about financial stability or finding their right person. It's about becoming the right person yourself. This process of self work can take years, and it's a journey that's they're not willing to rush. So they would rather be single and emotionally healthy than partnered and dysfunctional, where it takes us until we're in our 30s and sometimes 40s before we get our shit together. Now that men and women alike got their shit together, they're trying to marry in their 40s. Now, the catastrophic failure of that, trying to marry in their 40s, is that women are less desirable in their 40s. While they're still capable of getting married to someone, they're less valuable because the majority of men that still want to have children can't have children with her. So she would only be partnering with men who don't mind or don't want to have children, which limits her options. So she's not able to chase after the top 23%. She's only able to be accepted by whatever's left. Because the mid 34% that are still desired somewhat, that do still desire children, are not going to be desiring the women over the age of 40. Most cultures around the world consider the women over the age of 25 or 28 to be societal leftovers where they're undesired. And then after 30 and after 40, they're even less desired. So getting that partner and getting that marriage and getting those, or just getting the partner and not getting married and raising the children at 20, where your kids are grown at 40, you know what I mean? It's it's the ideal path, but not too many people are seeking that. He said Xander for president. I'm down for that. This focus on mental wellness is a radical act of self-preservation, and it fundamentally extends the timeline for when marriage even becomes a consideration. You can't understand the millennials' view on marriage without understanding that they are, in many ways, the children of a grand failed experiment. They're the first generation to grow up in the shadows of the divorce revolution that swept through society in the 70s and 80s. Baby boomers married young and divorced in record numbers. As a result, many millennials spent their childhoods navigating emotional fallout of their parents' separations. The Gen Zs also were experiencing this because the Gen Zs, while marrying later in life, we're still dealing with the divorce in exponential rates, which led to the current large quantity of child custody cases that are not in the men's favor, where even right now in 2025, only 18% of men acquire their children from child custody cases. 18% of fit fathers acquire their children from child custody cases. This collective childhood trauma is the ghost in the machine of millennial relationships, which is a silent but powerful force shaping their decisions about love and commitment. Because you have to think about this. The children that are 20 right now, 20 to 25 right now, the Gen Zs, the millennials, are the ones that are the product of the 40 and 50-year-olds. Whether we had kids at 15 or we had kids at 20, at 45, our kids will be 25 or our kids will be 30. And a lot of us that would have gotten into relationships and either not gotten married, had the children, fell apart, and now the children are dealing with that. Or if we got married and got divorced after 5 or 10 years, 14 years worth of marriage, and now we're dealing with the divorce side of life, the Gen Zs are the product of that. And it's going to be a silent but powerful force that shapes their decisions about their love and commitment. So the most direct impact is a deep-seated fear of repeating the mistakes of the past. For many, their main example of marriage was one of conflict, unhappiness, and eventual collapse. They saw firsthand the emotional and financial devastation of divorce and what it could cause the both sides of the family. They were the kids shuttled between two homes or kept away from certain family members, the unwilling listeners in their parents' fights, the silent witnesses to heartbreak. These experiences leave a permanent mark. They create a powerful, often subconscious link between marriage and failure. This isn't a cynical outlook, it's a learned response based on what they saw. The result is an intense aversion to risk when it comes to marriage. They see it not as a romantic fairy tale, but as a high stakes gamble with potential catastrophic downsides. Why? They think, would I rush into something that has a 50-50 chance of ending in pain and failure? This fear breeds caution. It turns getting married from a leap of faith into a carefully calculated decision weighed down by the heavy history of their parents. Michael says, the girls I met, he's 70 now, but the girls I met were girls that loved adventure. Since in the summer we worked at Mountain Rainier National Park and climbed it and rappelled off the cliff. You are talking about going to the top of a mountain, diving off of that mountain into the water back when you were in your 20s, trying to pull that off when you're 70, not going to work. If you get to the top of the mountain, they're going to have to hand you oxygen and carry you back down that mountain. Jumping off that mountain leads to a heart attack. I'm not trying that. But I understand what you mean. The women like excitement. The women like adventure. The women were the reason why the guys would go to the watering hole and dive in and get caught up with leeches and stuff. Uh, like the Goonies. Every Goonies had a hot chick in it. It was always, you had a bunch of weird guys that didn't fit in anywhere, and then you had at least one hot chick and her best friend in every Goonies group. And the hot chick was the adventurous one, and her friend was the shy, bashful one that just went along because she didn't want to stay at home. The baby boomers had fathers living at home. The baby boomers had the fathers living at home. The Gen Xers, the generation after that, didn't have fathers living at home because those were the ones where the divorces happened when the kids were single digits. So the baby boomers, the people that were born in the 50s and 60s and 70s, they grew up with their fathers. But the children that were born in the 80s and 90s and the 2000s, they grew up without their fathers. And now the 2025 generation is the grown children from broken homes, which is the reason why they're less likely to lead to that marriage. He said the zombie generation. You ain't lying. These folks, they're willing to pop some Molly with some fentanyl in it and wander around like a zombie. It's crazy out here. Special shout out to Alpha. He's up here first time tonight. Yes, it was the boomers. Bingo. Yeah, look, we cover the spread. But because of what's going on, baby boomer, the millennials are not interested as much in marriage. They're less interested in long-term committed relationships. A lot of the times, the guys don't even know how to get into the dating game because interacting with women is difficult in person and nearly impossible online. We have the in-person engagements where we have the one bitter bitch in the group that likes to shame the guy for coming up and telling the girl that he's interested in her. We have the public humiliation that guys have to experience when we approach a girl, especially if she's in a group of other girls. And then we have to deal with that rejection after the fact. A respectful no is a rejection that we can tolerate. But a humiliating, embarrassing no, where she has to make a scene about the fact that the guy approached her, is the thing that the guys have to avoid the most. And we never know what we're going to encounter when we walk up to a girl. So when we see her by herself, we hope that she's not going to stranger danger Me Too movement in the middle of a mall. And if she's in a group of people, even though the girl we're interested in is not going to embarrass us, the person that's with her more than likely will devalue us, because what they'll do is the girl you're not talking to will try to stop you from talking, and then she will get louder, the louder she gets, the more embarrassing and humiliating the situation becomes. And now you're a public scene because the quiet girl that you actually was interested in is the one you're trying to talk to, and the loud, obnoxious one is blocking. And it's terrible because not just from the perspective of men, it's terrible for the perspective of women, because the one that wasn't desired is not protecting her homegirl from a bad man. She's preventing her homegirl from finding happiness while she's with her homegirl, because if the guy was able to approach with respect and communicate respectfully, then the friend is not even willing to gauge the guy's character and personality to find out if he's worthy of her friend. If he's not willing to throw money at the both of them, the loud, obnoxious chick will prevent the quiet chick from finding happiness. And that's crazy. So now you got a bunch of single women because every other woman is trying to keep every other single woman from finding a man. And if she finds a man, the advice of all of the other single women is leave that man and go back to staying single. Why? Then when they're in their 40s, it ain't shit because they ain't got one. 34 cats in the house because when they was young and they could have found a man, they treated all the men like garbage. Michael said, that's true for sure. Nuclear rejection equals hurt, men and women. It is true. It is true. The worst part about the modern dating field right now is that if the guy isn't throwing his money around and the girl isn't spreading her legs on a regular basis, there is very little room for interaction. So, since the expectation from men is that the men are going to want sex, so the women's expectation from men is that the men are going to want sex. And when a man walks up looking for a lifelong partnership, he gets devalued before he even speaks. The women's expectation, where the men believe that the women's expectation is money. If he doesn't have enough money for whatever she's trying to do, he's not even going to present himself. And if a female does approach him, he's always going to be wondering in his mind, is she here for my money? So since a predisposition has been built on both sides of the fence, it is hard for the relationship to formulate because the self-preservation of don't let her steal all my resources and the self-preservation of don't let him use me for sex prevents them from finding out what the other person is capable of and how they can benefit from this in a long-term relationship. This generation of individuals, they're going to be approaching marriage not with the starry-eyed optimism of past generations, but with the cautious pragmaticism of an investor looking at a volatile stock, which by far is what I've been telling you guys to consider going forward. Because if women are investing into their men, the women have something to lose when they abandon their investment. If men curate their investment opportunities, doing more research on the value of this opportunity, they would be able to determine if this is worth keeping. When the man commits, the woman recoups on her investment. When the man walks away from the investment, the woman reinvests in something else. If the women were doing the chasing, since the women benefits from the man's estate, the women would actually have a better relationship because she would be finding a guy that is worth her paying for. And then that guy would determine that she is worth paying for as well, where you would develop mutual respect. People with true facts today are rare. Oh, of course not. Read everyone's bio. Most women have the same thing. They're God-fearing women and they love to travel. That's the common thing that's in there. But their day-to-day expectations do not reflect either one of them. They would not mind you taking them places, but they don't travel every month or every year or every week. They love to travel. Gotta understand. And then Michael says, I recommend subbing to this channel. I learned here. Definitely take the time to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. He said, don't chase that bee. She'll use it against you. Bro, these women use the pee like a walking ATM, bro. D goes in, money comes out every single time. There are so many women in society, and not all women do it, but there are so many women in society that will leverage their bodies in a negotiation when a woman does not bring enough to the negotiation. There was a video I seen on YouTube. I thought it was funny, but I was disappointed about it at the same time. I laughed at it because I was like, this is what they really do. But I was disappointed about the fact that they put that on TV. Dude was trying to sell a watch for $2,000. The girl was willing to give the guy $1,000 for the watch, take him to dinner, and then sleep with him after that. So that devalues the watch to $1,000 and favors. But it devalues the woman because her body was worth the change that was not in the deal with the watch. So he gets $1,000, and then if she buys him, let's say $150 meal, that's $1,150. The other $750 was what the sex was worth. Bro, that is Backpage prices. That is OnlyFans prices. Why are the millennials utilizing that method? What I'm not willing to pay for, I'll sleep with you for it. To put it on my tab. Put sex as the payment of my tab. You're gonna have so many female. You know it's against the law for you to pay your rent by sex. You can't sleep with the landlord because you don't got enough money to pay the rent. That is actually true. That is actually true, Michael. The best way to get sex is to ignore it because they'll throw it at you because you're not interested in it. Well, good to see you around here. We got a little bit more time. We got 45 out of 7. We got about 34 more pages to cover. So we're probably gonna be here for another hour. 30 minutes, roughly. So this caution has led to a fascinating and counterintuitive trend. So while millennials are marrying less and later in life, those who do get married are actually divorcing at lower rates than previous generations. The US divorce rate is in a long-term decline from its peak and is observing this drop being driven by the marital habits of millennials. It sees this as a paradox, but it's the logical result of their risk adverse mindsets. They are, in effect, divorce proofing their relationships before they even think about trying to tie the knot. Now, this happens in a few ways. First, as we've discussed, they're waiting longer. The median age for first marriage is now the highest it's ever been. By marrying in their late 20s, early 30s, they're entering partnerships with more maturity, self-awareness, and more stable careers and finances. Research consistently shows that marrying after the age of 25 dramatically reduces the risk of divorce. They are simply waiting until they're better equipped to handle the challenges of a lifelong partnership. Second, they are being far more selective about their partners. The days of marrying your high school sweetheart are mostly gone. Millennials are taking part in a much longer and more rigorous vetting process after they finish slapping it against the wall. They're taking years to get to know a partner, often living with them for a long time before marriage to test their compatibility in a real world setting. They're having the tough conversations up front about money, career goals, kids, and values. They're looking for partners who aren't just romantic interests, but true equals who share their visions for life. This deliberate approach to picking a partner is a direct response to what they saw as the impulsiveness of their parents' generation. They are determined to choose a partner based on real compatibility and shared goals rather than fleeting passions or societal pressures. Third, there's a growing acceptance of premarital counseling and other tools designed to build a stronger relational foundation. They're approaching marriage like a skill to be learned, not just an instinct to be followed. And this proactive approach to relationships and the health of those relationships is a hallmark of the generation. They're willing to put it in the work of upfront addressing of potential issues before they become marriage ending crises. So they're going to evaluate what it will take to make this work, and they put in the effort to make it work before they navigate the fallouts of failure. Now, this entire set of behaviors, including waiting longer, being more selective, living together first, and seeking guidance, is a collective effort to de risk the institution of marriage. They saw what happened when their parents jumped in with both feet, and they are choosing to dip a toe in, test the water a little bit, and check the weather report before they even consider taking the plunge. They aren't rejecting marriage altogether, but they are demanding that it prove its worth before they get involved with it. They're treating it with the seriousness and caution they believe that their parents' generation failed to do. And in doing so, they may ironically be saving the institution from itself by building unions that are more intentional, resilient, and ultimately more likely to last. Now, the final piece of this puzzle is maybe the most revolutionary. Millennials aren't just delaying or rejecting the old model of marriage. They're actively creating and embracing new models of partnership that better fit their modern lives. The very definition of a committed long term relationship is being rewritten, and the traditional legally binding marriage is no longer the only or even the most desirable option available. The biggest change in this redefinition is the rise of normalization of living together. For previous generations, cohabitation was often seen as taboo or, at best, a quick traditional step right before a wedding. For millennials, that's no longer the case. Living together without being married has become a mainstream, socially acceptable, and often long term form of partnership. A 2023 report noted that a share of cohabiting couples has more than doubled since the mid 1990s. More adults between 18 and 44 have now lived with a partner than have ever been married in the past. So you're expecting more and more people between 18 and 44 to live with somebody more often or before they get married to somebody. Cohabitation is no longer just a trial run for marriage. For many, it is the relationship. It offers many of the benefits of marriage: emotional support, shared expenses, and companionship without the legal and financial baggage that comes with a marriage certificate. It provides a level of flexibility and autonomy that is highly valued by a generation that prides personal freedom. And then the relationship is defined by the day to day commitments between those two people, not by the legal contract. If the relationship ends, separating is far simpler and less costly than a formal divorce. Take your stuff, take my stuff, and the things that we don't agree on, let's sell it and split the difference. This makes cohabitation feel like a more modern, practical, and less risky way to build a life with someone. The things that you want that I don't care anything about, you can have, and the things that I want that you can't carry out of the house, I can have. And we just split. This preference for cohabitation is part of a broader, swift shift away from the marriage model and towards a partnership model. The traditional idea of marriage often came with a lot of unspoken expectations, many of them based on outdated gender roles. There was the husband as the main breadwinner and the wife as the homemaker. While these roles have been evolving for decades, millennials are the generation most committed to a truly egalitarian partnership. They want a partner who is a co equal in every sense, financially, domestically, and emotionally. The focus is on teamwork, mutual support, and a flexible division of labor based on the individual strengths, not on gender. From this perspective, the legal institution of marriage can feel like an unnecessary and historically loaded construct. If you've already built a life based on a partnership of equals, what does a piece of paper from the state really add? For many, the answer is not much. If you're investing like I'm telling you to invest, the only thing that piece of paper is going to do is allow you to have an extra $30,000 of non taxed income from your stock portfolio. Beyond that, there are no other benefits that you can achieve. However, when you think about it from a singles perspective, if you have $60,000 of income from yourself and your wife has $60,000 of income from herself, where y'all aren't married, but y'all are living together, y'all both have a combined $120,000 worth of non taxed income that could be coming into a joint bank account where y'all could be living an $80,000 a year lifestyle and reinvesting $20,000 into each portfolio where y'all would not have to work. So the marriage construct, the certificate doesn't do much. It only benefits if you're filing joint, if you're filing as one unit. But if you're filing as singles, it doesn't do much. They believe the strength of their commitment is shown through their daily actions and mutual respect, not through a formal ceremony. The declining necessity of marriage is also fueled by changing legal and social landscapes. For centuries, marriage was a practical necessity. It was the only way to get social legitimacy for a relationship, to provide legal rights for children, and for women to get financial security. Of those functions, if many of them aren't exclusive to marriage anymore, the stigma against unmarried parents has dropped dramatically. Outside of getting married to get your foreign wife or foreign husband a U.S. passport, there isn't another reason to validate getting married. He says, hello, special shout out to mixed martial arts. Do you know anything about constipation? Here on this and that, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between, we always have to have an interesting yet ridiculous question. While there are no stupid questions, there are inappropriate times to ask them. Constipation is going to be devolved from an imbalance in your digestive system. Typically, if you have consumed too much fiber, your stool might be more solid. And then in other situations, if you have consumed too much glucose or sugar, then your stool might be more liquid. You can experience constipation or diarrhea as a byproduct of lactose intolerance from consuming dairy. So it also can be the byproduct of stress. Irritable bowel syndrome can cause you to experience constipation or diarrhea. Infrequent bowel movements, by holding your bowels because you're at work for too long, or overconsumption, like those individuals that drink until they pass out at the bar. then they start having involuntary bowel movements. Anxiety can lead to the increase of bowel movements. So you can deal with constipation and diarrhea in many ways. It says, what is it ridiculous? Or why is it ridiculous? I'm struggling with it right now. If you're struggling with constipation right now, then you can try taking some laxatives that can help you with alleviating your constipation because the laxatives will soften your stool. However, the byproduct of taking too many laxatives is that you will eventually end up with diarrhea. And then you're going to have to end up consuming some fiber in order to reharden your stool. Um, but outside of laxatives for the constipation and fiber for the diarrhea, there isn't much that you can do outside of a balanced diet and finding less stress in your life and reducing your anxiety in your life so that you can maintain healthy bowel function. One of the ridiculous aspects of it is because even though you're dealing with it right now, we're talking about marriage with millennials and you're talking about the inability to poop. That was the ridiculousness about it. Not on topic, but not ridiculous. Well, okay. If we're talking about a life-changing perspective and somebody jumps in and starts talking about hemorrhoids, it is an inappropriate time for that. That type of question is fantastically used on Sunday for the questions and comments of the day because it is all about asking questions all day long. So I'm having trouble with my poop. Help me out with that. That's a Sunday question. We're talking about why millennials are delaying getting married and the divorce rate is reducing based on those decisions. Marriage related topics, cost of living related topics, investment related topics, as far as how those investments are interfered with by marriage, or or um, the family values and enforcement of family expectations, because you have some individuals with different religious backgrounds. They come together, then their parents don't approve, and they have a Romeo and Juliet style relationship where they don't blend together quite well, and that damages the relationship, which negatively impacts the ability to get married. Questions in those realms would be like exclusive uh, debates. He says, then don't answer it. No one is forcing you to respond to my comment if you deem it inappropriate. Okay, hold on. I know Michael's still lingering around. Fact is that if you have a completely inappropriate comment that should not be seen on social media at all, you would just get banned. However, if it was an inappropriately timed question, but still reasonably significant to your particular situation, which is what made it ridiculous, because while it's important to you, it was asked at an inappropriate time. Not a stupid question, just inappropriately timed. Uh, it I would respond to it because instead of me talking about the marriage, I would talk about your inability to poop for 10 minutes. Because on this and that, we do talk about this, that, and everything in between. However, we also do kind of theme a lot of our discussions where the straw man topic of the main topic usually is related to the topic. So if we're talking about marriage and divorce and income and family living and family support in marriage and divorce and children and educational systems and investing in the marriage and investing in the children and investing in your retirement, and there's so many different conversations that could stem from this topic. Poop is not one of those topics. Does that make sense? It's like if we're here talking about the educational system, whether or not you have holes in your socks right now has nothing to do with the educational system, but whether or not you would be willing to pay for school uniforms for your children would be appropriate for a discussion for the educational system. So, not in any sense of devaluing your question. It is the fact that since you asked the question, I'm going to answer the question, but it was completely unrelated to the topic. You say, okay, that is fair, not appropriately timed, but not in invalid question. Exactly. So there are no such thing as stupid questions. It's just inappropriately timed questions. So while that question would have been more meaningfully answered on Sunday night, the you could have asked about all kinds of stuff related to marriage, divorce, U.S. passport marriages, um, bigamy. We could have talked about having multiple wives in the United States. We could have talked about the value of marriage with the girlfriend on the side kind of thing, the wife contracts, all of the different things that's reasonably linked to the core topic. But instead, we're talking about poop. See that they don't coordinate with one another. So I it doesn't derail a 2 hour and 20-minute podcast, but it does vastly deviate away from it. But in the interest of your health, I have absolutely little problem. I do have a problem, but I have little problem with answering the question based on the topics at hand. Is that why on earth would I want multiple wives? I don't even want one of them. Well, some men believe that you're not able to find the perfect woman specifically because the majority of modern women in Western culture are limited to what they're willing to do with or for their man. As a result, a man would have to be committed to multiple women to piece together uh, the positivities of each woman to make one great woman, which would offset the negativity of each woman that they have. Um, Polygamy is starting to become more and more of a thing, having multiple partners in a group relationship style scenario is starting to become more and more of a thing. While it's not yet legally recognized around the world, having more than one partner in a relationship would be an ongoing thing. And then with the concept of procreation, women can only have one child per year. If a man was trying to have more than one child per year, he would have to have more than one woman that he would be taking care of so that he could have more than one child per year. Take like Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon had 5 children that were born 30 days apart. In order for him to do that, he would have had to have been sleeping with 5 different women in the same year. Now, his income can support all 5 of those women, but you know what I mean? That's kind of what that's about. Do you believe that women are inferior to men? Now, that's a good question. Very valid question. I actually believe that women are uh, more successful and more capable than men because men are more distracted by sexual desire. Women are not distracted by much of anything. Women can achieve a lot more than men can achieve in modern society based on all of the laws that supported the women when the women were restricted from performing. Not because they weren't good enough, because they weren't allowed. Now that they are not only allowed, but they are expected based on feminist models to perform, women are overachievers in comparison to men. Some of the things that women can't do that men can probably do more of is lift heavy objects, just based on body type. But if you get a more muscular woman versus a slender man, she can still outlift him. But a female standing next to a man, same body type, the man is going to be slightly more stronger than the female. And then women go to a gym membership and they only work out their butt and their thighs. And men, more often than not, go to the gym membership and work out their arms and their chest. Some work on their legs, but a lot of men skip leg day, which is why they have large torsos and skinny legs. So women can carry children which is going to take the entire midsection of their bodies, and they're going to have stronger thighs and stronger legs. Men are going to be lifting stuff that is way heavier than children, including the mother with the child, because their arms and their back is capable of lifting better things. But outside of that, when you start talking about mentality, a woman's focus is a lot more driven than a man's focus, because men are distracted by desire. And then with the economy right now, we still have affirmative action laws that require a certain specific quantity of women to be in every level of management. So women would more likely get promoted faster than men, not because of her skill set, but because they don't have the quantity of people that are supposed to be at that level that are female. They've done away with a lot of the affirmative action laws that requires minorities to be grandfathered into a specific position just because they're black, but they have not abolished the laws for women yet. So women still have the ability to climb the corporate ladder and become CEOs inside of a year just because there aren't enough female CEOs in the company. Um, I believe that because women fought for more responsibility in their liberation, that they have lost track of their femininity in modern society, because the last generation did not express feminine women, and the current generation is not replicating feminine women. And outside of the models that you see in the fashion shows, you have very little expression of what true femininity is. And it's not just how a woman walks, it's how she behaves, how she treats the men in society, how she treats her family, um, the family orientation or the lack thereof. All of that uh, feminine model is not expressed by the modern women, that they believe that that is oppressive. And that's yet another problem, because if the women do not want to fulfill the feminine roles, they're going to end up being forced to find masculine men that are capable of performing feminine roles. But when men shift from masculine roles to feminine roles to offset their overly masculine female, they're going to be in a position where the female more than likely will lose respect for the man, because the man is not performing masculine roles, and women are still instinctively conditioned to look for alpha male masculinity. But if she finds that alpha male masculinity, she's going to be less satisfied with that, because she does not have the authoritative control of being the masculine female in a relationship. So it's a double standard. If the woman has the realistic expectations of finding a masculine man, she must be willing to be subordinate to that man. And if she wants to be the dominant alpha woman of the relationship, she must find a subordinate man. You can't do both, because men are not fluid. Men are exclusively one or the other. They're either overly masculine or under masculine. That's it. They're either alphas or betas, sometimes sigmas, which are less alpha but still authoritative. So that is a more meaningful question towards our dynamic. Now, in many places, domestic partnership laws provide some of the same legal protections as marriage. Socially, no one bats an eye at couples who have been living together for decades with no plans of marrying. This erosion of marriage's unique functions has made it feel less essential. It has shifted from being a public necessity to a private choice. When something is no longer required for social survival, its value becomes purely symbolic. And for a generation as practical as millennials, symbolism alone often isn't good enough reasons to sign a lifelong legal contract. This all leads to the ultimate question: is marriage becoming obsolete? For the growing number of millennials, the answer isn't a simple yes or no. It's more that the traditional form of it is being questioned. They see the historical pillars of marriage, which is economic transactions, social mandates, and religious sacraments as relics of the past era that have little to do with their own lives. They are not anti love or anti commitment. On the contrary, their high standards for partnership suggest that they value it immensely, and they're going to focus more on the intimacy than the transactions. Nevertheless, they are decoupling the idea of a lifelong partnership from the institution of marriage. They believe it's possible to have one without the other. They are pioneering new forms of family and commitment that are more flexible, more individualistic, and they hope more authentic to their own values. They are choosing long term cohabitation, forming commitment, partnership without legal ties, and in some cases, exploring alternative structures. They're unbounding the package deal of love, sex, cohabitation, and family that was once neatly contained within the institution of marriage. And they're resembling the pieces in a way where when they put this back together, it will make sense for them. This isn't the death of commitment, it's an evolution. So, what does all this tell us? The narrative that millennials are just a fickle, non committal generation killing marriage is a huge oversimplification. It completely misses the bigger picture. The decline in marriage rates isn't a sign of apathy, it's the result of a rational, deliberate, and generation wide reassessment of risk and reward. It's a story that connects four distinct parts. First, there's the economic reality, because a generation crushed by unpredicted student debt, an impossible housing market, and a shaky job market is making a calculated decision that the financial risk of marriage often outweigh the benefits. Financial freedom isn't a luxury, it's a necessity and necessarily the foundation for a stable life. The second, it's a story of personal evolution in a culture that celebrates individualism. Millennials are prioritizing the journey of self discovery. They choose to invest in their careers, their personal growth, and their mental health before merging their lives with someone else's. They believe the strongest unions are built by two complete individuals, not two halves trying to become whole. Third, it's a story of historical trauma. As the children of the divorce boom, millennials are going to be carrying the scars of their parents' broken marriage. So, with the baby boomers and their frequent quantities of divorces and the catastrophic divorce outcomes leading to the emotional, psychological scars uh, of the millennials have given a deep seated caution and a desire to divorce proof their own relationships by waiting longer and choosing more wisely. A strategy that's ironically leading to more stable marriages for those who do decide to get married. And finally, it's a story of innovation because millennials aren't just passively rejecting an old model, they're actively building new ones through the normalization of living together and creation of egalitarian partnerships. They're redefining what a committed relationship can look like in the 21st century. When you put these pieces together, it's clear millennials are not rejecting love, they are not rejecting commitment. they are rejecting a single rigid one-size-fit-all script for how to live a life. They're demanding that marriage be more than a tradition or a social milestone to check off of a list. They are insisting that to be a conscious, deliberate choice, a true partnership of equals entered into a contract from a position of personal and financial wholeness. In their quest for freedom, they may not be destroying marriage at all. They may be saving it, forcing it to evolve into an institution that is stronger, more resilient, and more meaningful than ever before. So the question is no longer when will you get married, but why are you getting married? And for a growing number of people, the answer has become more compelling than because that's just what you do. This is obviously a huge and deeply personal topic, and I'm incredibly curious to hear what you guys think about it. What are your thoughts? Is marriage still the ultimate goal for you, or has it become a meaning that is fundamentally changed for you? Do you see this as a positive evolution or a worrying trend? Share your story and your perspectives in the comments down below. That conversation that we have in the comment section is just as important as the live that you're in. And if this topic resonated with you and gave you some food for thought, please hit that like button. It is genuinely helping the channel reach more people, and make sure that you guys take the time to subscribe to the channel on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Then make sure that you come to YouTube and hit that notification button for more explorations of the cultural shifts that are shaping our modern world. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about some of the things that kicks off the downward spirals in divorces in all ages. We're going to talk the differences in what triggers a divorce in the above 40 age and what triggers the divorce before 40 age. Then after that, on Sunday, we're going to be doing our questions and comments from the fans. And we're going to be doing on Monday, we're going to be doing partially a review on the TikTok deal, where things are sitting at, and who all looks like they're going to be involved in it, when it more than likely will resolve itself, and what other catastrophic failures that we're experiencing with geopolitical politics that are negatively impacting our ability to invest and make money. So make sure that you take the time to come to the show every night, because we got something different for you guys every single night. Before we go, I want to start saying, by ladies, as long as the situation doesn't make sense, I'm going to keep asking you ladies to make it make sense. So ladies, please make it make sense. And then fellas, I do this for you, okay? I give you guys the information that you guys need to become higher value men. You guys can take this information and reincorporate it and make the changes in your life that benefits you. Ladies, this information is not exclusive to the men. You ladies can take this information as well and utilize this information to make yourselves higher value women. When two people come together with the same intent, you're more likely to grow together. Utilize this time to find the things that you don't like about yourself, that you don't like about your life, that are inside of your control, and make the effort to change the things that are inside of your control while navigating around the things that you cannot. This will eliminate the things that are less satisfactory to you, giving you a more satisfactory life, which will make you more fulfilled, which allows you to find a more fulfilling relationship. Instead of settling for less because you feel like you're worth less because you have so much chaos, eliminate the chaos so that your value goes up, so that you can find someone more valuable for you. Because ultimately, when you aim lower than what you're worth, because you feel like you less than what you should be, you end up with less satisfaction, which ultimately leads to one of the issues that will lead to breakups, that will lead to divorces, and lead to wasting your time and a lot of your resources. So take it upon yourselves to fix your decision making process so that you're not making fiscally irresponsible decisions, and then fix your financial decisions so that you have more finances to give you a more stable and peaceful personal life. With that being said, I want to thank you guys for coming to This and That. I'm your host, Xander, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. And I'll see you guys tomorrow night.
Chase validation, now I validate myself. Building inner strength, putting doubt upon the shelf. No more unnecessary drama, no more wasted time. Climbing higher, constantly making my own climb. My network is my net worth. Choose your company wise. Surround yourself with eagles, not with sheep in disguise. Every interaction is a reflection of my brand. Quality over quantity, that's my personal command. Living, I'm manifesting my vision, cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield to mediocrity and chaos. I will never yield.